Hey, everybody. Um, Hopefully everyone is doing well. I had a little bit of time as my girlfriend is at Disneyland today with her brother. Thought I'd hop on here, do a little live stream, see how everybody is doing, see if see how life is for everyone. Answer some questions if anybody thinks I can help. Hey, Bishop. Finally, live, yeah. Life is good, man. I'm probably about 2 months into my new job, and I'm pretty happy. Um, so that's good. You'll usually know within a month or two if you're gonna hate your job, and I don't think it's that. So I'm happy. I'm really enjoying my job. Um, the other thing is like just saving, investing, living life. Um, I got some season tickets to the NFL, so my girlfriend's a big fan. So in a couple months we'll be going there. Shout out to all our Dubaian. Is that a word for Dubai? Individuals originating from Dubai, Dubaian. Shout out to Al Fajor Bari from Dubai. Is working at a startup as intense as the media portrays, or are you worried about layoffs across the industry? So I think you have to put in perspective, like, um, what sort of startup you go to. I personally, when I look at startups, it's a pretty high bar for me to consider a startup going from a relatively stable company like Amazon. So when I was evaluating potential, new opportunities, and is I don't mess with companies that don't have $1 billion evaluation or higher. Kind of my thought process behind that is just that the business has proven that there's a demand. Now it's just about scaling it to that next level. And so it's hard to say like, hey, you're worth $1 billion in theory and be like startup. Startup in the sense that like it's a growing company, um, not in a startup company. So yeah, things are gonna be fast paced. There's gonna be high demand, and like they're gonna want you to. They have that pressure because it is such a rapidly growing industry. So as far as layoffs across the industry, I'm not worried about that. I would say um, the one of the things that helps me with that is that I don't think too much about the here and the now. I think about the future. And so in the moment, like, there's a bunch of uncertainty with, the war in Ukraine and inflation and a possible recession and like all the stuff that you talk about. But as long as you have the capital to survive the storm, then it's it's fine. Um, you know, and so because bad things happen. This is one thing I think that like, and like, how does this relate to your career as a software engineer? Well, it's much easier to excel and do well when you're not stressed about external things. And so for me, I know that I'm surviving. I'm prone to anxiety. This is something I'm aware of. So what are things that give me anxiety? Well, losing a job, right? I've pretty much have never lost a job my entire career, but that gives me anxiety. Not having money for a random bill that pops up, that gives me anxiety. Um, Knowing that bad times are coming and not being prepared, that gives me anxiety. So instead, um, I just go and I make sure that what do I think is the worst case scenario? And something actually happened this year recently where I paid down 17% of my house to eliminate the PMI, and that cleared out pretty much all my cash and all my stocks. And I had my all I had left was about my rainy day fund. And then a week after, I got a tax bill that was $20,000 that I wasn't expecting to get. Not I was expecting a tax bill about $5,000. But instead of that being a scramble death blow, I have my emergency fund that like, okay, emergency comes up. The government says I owe them a lot more in taxes than I thought. Um, Fine. Uh, here it is. And now, refilling that emergency bucket, making it a little bit bigger than last time, right? And leaving that alone, not touching it, so that the next time a $30,000 emergency comes from a 20,000, great. And you're not going to have too many emergencies like that in your life in general, and that could be, oh, I lose my job. Great. Like, what's $30,000? Well, it's 6 months of, mortgage payments and everything else. Like, okay, great. So, anyhow, am I worried? No, not in the sense that like I I think I could get a job relatively quickly, and I don't I feel very confident about where I'm working and um how the business is being ran. But do I plan for that? Yeah, sure. I don't want to be caught with my, pants down, sort of thing. So, what advice do you give someone who wants to get into programming? Have an idea of what you want to build and just build something. I think one of the things that really gets people off the path is just not they just sort of stay in tutorial hell, and that's not fun after a while. If you're like, hey, have a reason for why you want to get into programming, and then as you're getting into programming, look at and see like, am I getting there? And if you're not, make adjustments. So often people want to go and become a developer and work, but they never do anything different than what they started in their sort of learning journey, unless they never get to that stage, or they do in a much slower pace. So just being willing to sort of reevaluate where you're at, and then see like, is this giving me like, if am I going and doing another Udemy course going to solve my issue, um, or is this just something I'm comfortable with because it's easy? Do you store any text files for yourself? You do so. I'm not sure what you're asking. Ayo. How do you go about finding programs that need a programmatic solution? Sometimes after a while, when you learn sort of foundational skills and principles and patterns, um, because much easier. So, because you kind of have these, you understand how things fit in together. Um, what I would say that as far as getting there, being intentional. So many engineers repeat that first year 10 times, and so they're the same engineer a decade later than they were in their first year. And so forcing yourself to go out and just read about these things and grow and not be the same engineer a year later. So, um, I'm realizing TypeScript is an industry standard. Any learning recommendations? There's this fantastic course called Object Oriented Programming in TypeScript on LinkedIn. I hear it's by a coding god of sorts. But so what to expect during your first week of a new job? Yeah. Probably you're gonna set up a little bit of environment. You're going to uh probably set up some benefits. Gonna have quite a bit of onboarding. You might have an onboarding buddy or like a mentor that is going to, you'll go to for questions and um hopefully be able to solve that. So that'd be one thing. And also you may not get up and running as quickly as you want. Like, I think so often when we start jobs, we're looking to pretty much provide value the second we're there. So, am I primarily working front end? Yes, I do pretty much 100% front end. How much time should I spend at least to be a well-paid developer? It all depends on what your definition of well-paid is. And it's not a matter of time. I mean, I think well, I think oftentimes people try to jump straight to well-paid, and I think that's a mistake. Step one should be, what does it take to go and just get a low paying developer job? And then once you're in that low paying developer job, how do I turn that low paying into a okay paid developer job, and then when I'm in that job, how do I turn that into a well paid developer job? And then it's just a matter of continuing on what you're doing from there. I don't remember working with that with on call now. I know TypeScript React. I have 3 years of experience as for making six figures. Do I need to branch out into backend or can I coast from here? Well, it depends on where you're happy at, right? Like making six figures in any sort of engineering role isn't that hard, in the U.S. anyhow. So, like, if you're making $100,000, you're probably underpaid with several years of experience. But have you broken into the 200s? Have you broken into the 300s? Have you gone to places with better benefits? It's amazing to me how few people. Oh, hey Brian, I'm glad you found it helpful, man. It's amazing to me how many people don't value benefits. Um, Even though you can sit down and do a basic calculation of the monetary value, and see that, like, oh yeah, maybe I'm only getting a 10K bump in base salary, but not realize that, you know, there's 20, $30,000 worth of benefits that are better, that, you know, will impact you in a similar way. And so, it depends on, when I look at an offer, I look at the whole offer, right? I I don't necessarily care about base salary. I don't necessarily care about stock options. Or, RSUs or whatever it may be. I care about the total compensation because that's what's important to me. And you weigh that. I care about the benefits because that's part of the total compensation. You just look at it and say, okay, like, what is this? I care about, like, lifestyle. I care about, like, I give you an example of something that's, you could probably put a $30,000, maybe $20,000 value on. Is that, at my previous work, about once every 8 weeks, I would go on call for a week. Um, and I would handle deployments for a week. So two weeks out of every 8 weeks, which isn't terrible, I was on call of some sort. In my current role, I do zero on call, and that may change in the future. But right now, there are other teams that are on call and things like that, and so, um, as we own more stuff, that changed. But that there's value to that. There's value to, um, you know, certain 401k matches. There's value to vacation policies and paid holidays, and, like, you know, I can tell you, when I was at PwC and I went to Amazon, I lost about 10 paid holidays, which had a quite a bit of impact on me. So, uh, best CSS framework for React? I generally think people shouldn't use CSS frameworks, so I might be the wrong person to act. Why did I leave Amazon? I just wanted, some new challenges. Um, and there's opportunity and pay increases and things like that that made sense. Um, and so I wanted, a little bit more time off also, but generally I wanted to be challenged. I didn't feel like I was growing enough and had enough work. Um, I'd go back. I'd boomerang back maybe at some point in my career. It's not like I hated it or anything like that. Um, I just got very excited about, future opportunities, and, the more I learned about the company I'm at now at ClickUp, I just have loved it. It's felt so much, and I know I'm in a honeymoon phase, but it's really felt exactly what I was looking for. Um, and I'm working harder than I think I've worked in the last 5, 6 years. But, when you find that you're enjoying your work, it's much easier to do that. So, and that's without me working overtime. I just mean, like, intensity. Um, I don't really work overtime. I work very hard on having healthy boundaries, with workplaces, and this is something I talk to a lot of my mentees about establishing. Is that typically 6 o'clock here, this opens up, this closes down at 6. Opens up at 9 a.m. Eastern, closes at 6 p.m. Eastern. Might have 15-20 minutes here or there, but generally speaking, I have pretty healthy boundaries with working from home. And so many of my colleagues are getting very burnt out. Not in my current workplace, but all my friends are software engineers, and they're all at different companies, and they all sort of have fallen into that trap. Why no CSS frameworks? Name 3 points, please. Oh, I didn't realize those. Excuse me. But the first main one that I would say is that generally speaking, most engineers avoid learning CSS, and frameworks are a handicap to that. They also handle a lot of the responsive design issues, which increase the handicap, and it requires memorization rather than understanding of the core foundational skills. So, much like you essentially become, and I had this issue early on in my career when I just became so dependent upon Bootstrap that it became an issue. What's the ceiling in terms of pay as a senior engineer in normal Colorado area? 300K. I don't know what it is. I would say that generally the ceiling for a lot of software engineers that don't go into big tech. There's a difference here. There's two different tiers of pay for big tech. There's a non-big tech, which might be like your PwCs and Deloittes and things like that, and then like Home Depots and Walmarts and those types. And there's tech companies. In terms of cost of living area, in a normal cost of living area. In terms of normal cost of living area, it's like 150,000. In a tech company, it's probably somewhere in the 250 plus range. So in the 200s, 250 plus. I should say for senior level engineers, 250 plus, and it could go anywhere from 250 to 500. And that's for the senior level. Now, if you go a tier above that, it goes higher, right? So all this information, by the way, is on levels.fyi. It's a great resource to check out. Let's see here. If I go levels FYI and I look at Apple, Amazon, Facebook, and then I look at just the software engineer roles. Shout out to our Russian brothers. If I look at E4 at Facebook, that's total comp is 267. If I look at L5 at Amazon, total comp is 237. And if I look at the ICT3, total comp is 220. Now, these levels aren't always equal, but you kind of get an idea. Do I still recommend boot camps? I recommend you getting your career started as quickly as possible, and boot camps is one avenue to that. I think what ends up happening with a lot of people who don't succeed in boot camps, same thing happens with like college, is like you just kind of think you're going to go do this thing and then it's going to work. It doesn't really work that way. You need to apply yourself. You need to grow every day. You need to do apps every day, study every day till you get that job. It's really about getting your foot in the door more than anything else. Regarding your work boundaries, you work a lot more than that. What changed? Well, I used to work a lot more outside of work. I've always understood that the more I give to work, the less my hourly rate is with work, which then impacts money outside of it. Because if I'm working at my sort of full-time salary job, 80 hours a week, then I'm losing 40 hours a week in life. So I definitely used to work collectively a lot more outside of work. But as I've sort of am getting older, like I'm 34, guys. Like I'm getting, I'm 34 and my girlfriend's 26, so she's like a lot more active than I am. I'm tired. Like it's one of those things. I'm getting tired. I'm slowing down a bit. So and you get comfortable, man. It's as you go and make more money, the idea of increasing your income more and more becomes less and less attractive. I can't help myself, so I'm always working on something. But like right now I'm working on a course about RxJS for LinkedIn Learning. I'm always going to have something that I'm hustling on. Before this, a month ago, we launched the TypeScript section of W3 Schools. That was what I was working on for about 6 months. So I always have one thing, but like my mentoring, I've limited the amount of people that can come into my mentoring. So I'm only taking on 3 mentees right now at a certain tier. So it's just one of those things where I'm slowly just sort of, and that's also been one of those items that I've succeeded at and loved and like grown from the ground up. So, like I have 5 stars with 44 reviews as a mentor on Mentor Cruise. I'm one of the top ranked mentors on the platform, but right now I just don't have. I I like that stuff because I that basically just goes and funnels into investments, and I'm good at it, and I enjoy helping people. But I also don't necessarily like to trade my time for money. When I stop doing mentoring, typically that just stops. There's no more money coming in. That's just how that works. When I build course, I stop. I'm done, and then money keeps coming in, and it's nice and it's slower, but it's longer over a longer period of time, makes more money, and it's just nice to have residual income. So I choose what I spend my time on wisely. I don't want to say much more wisely, but I I I can understand that I can work every day until I'm 40 and that there be some sort of payoff, and I'd be happy with that. But the fact that I work every day and then like there's nothing left over till 40, that kind of bothers me a little bit. So that's kind of how I choose some of the projects I do. If you're gonna learn between JavaScript and PHP, go ahead and learn Node. Yeah. Hey Dylan, just want to thank you for the content all the years. I'm currently not in distributed tech, but have been working in the IT world a large part due to your content. You're welcome, Thomas. Good luck with everything. One thing that happened that's really awkward the other day is this hasn't happened in a while, and so like normally when it happens, I it's like I expect it to happen. I'm a little bit more on like guard, so like typically nobody knows me from YouTube. But it happened the other day. But the only like real times I've ever like someone's like, "Oh, hey, do you have a YouTube channel about software?" And it's been at like meetups in software or like conferences at software. That's usually the only 2 spots. And so we went to go see Doctor Strange on like opening night on like Thursday. The girlfriend and I, and there's like a bar inside there. And the bar dude, this guy caught me so off guard that I completely shut down, and I felt bad, so I tipped him like 40% on on it, or 45, 50%. Um, and it was because I just was like, I think this guy thinks I'm a dick. It just completely caught me off guard. I'm going up there to like get 2 drinks for the movies for Kat and I. And homeboy goes, "We got a YouTube legend in the house." I was like, "Oh shit." So if you're out there, man, I forget what your name is, but I'm sorry. Sorry if you're watching. I wasn't trying to be a dick. I just got caught off guard because I did one of these. I just kind of shut down. I was like, "Oh, haha, yeah. Can I have 2 seltzers?" And I like walked away. I was just like I say, I basically didn't acknowledge it just because it completely caught me off guard, man. Um, but anyhow. For someone who's self-taught developer, would you say freelance technical writing role is a good idea as you get your first developer-related job to get some relevant experience? Fun fact: my very first tech job when I dropped out of school, I was getting paid $45,000 a year. I was a technology trainer, which is kind of a cross between a technical writer and a business analyst. And so, while I was doing that at a tech company, I was studying elsewhere with the goal of getting converted at that company. But they didn't move fast enough for me. So around 8 months, I went and I jumped over to another job. Am I too late to get into tech with this coming crash? No, man. Keep going, man. Don't worry about that stuff. Uh, some features of a front end project that could be interesting. One, handle the basic fundamentals. Handle responsive design. Maybe do it mobile first if it makes sense. You could also make it into a progressive web app and add testing around it and make sure that its TypeScript is being used. What's the day in life as your software engineer? Pretty much every company I've worked at is pretty similar. You have a couple handful of agile meetings, stand-ups, retros, all that sort of stuff, and then you're doing a little bit of coding, and then following up on things and doing code reviews, and occasionally maybe creating documents and stuff like that. So do I get to work anywhere I've worked? I've worked remotely at my last 3 jobs. So I've worked remotely at PwC, minus the first 3 months when I was getting up and running, and then I worked remotely all of my time at Amazon, and I'm working remotely at ClickUp now. So, um, yeah, I mean, I can work pretty much ever. I've done quite a few trips where I go to, like, a city for, like, 10 days and get an Airbnb with some buddies, and we all just work remotely, so how long have I been in the tech industry? Maybe 6 years now. It's been a minute. I know you from YouTube and the free code camp video. Hey, that's where I got started here. What's the most challenging aspect within software engineering? I think it's a mental strain. So, especially when you're working remotely and having boundaries and things like that, I think it's just something a lot of people suffer with. And that, not giving into self doubt, not overworking yourself. Ultimately, at the end of the day, if your mind isn't right because you're having relationship issues or you're tired, it makes your job that much harder. So getting good sleep and handling mental stress and things like that is the best thing that you can do for yourself in terms of overcoming that. Thoughts about data science? Lots of great work. I prefer front end. I do a lot of front end. So hey, thanks, Natalia. Master's degree or not, worth it? I mean, compared to what? I can tell you that you're asking somebody who has a high school diploma and is doing very well for himself and doesn't what my girlfriend and I do this journal where once a day we answer a question, and one of the questions is like, what's one decision that you would go back and change? And it was like going to college. So I might not be the most um I may not be the most the most unbiased person to ask about it. um How do you manage learning besides your jobs? I try and put in a little bit of learning once a week at my current job. So, like, um, you know, when I feel like I'm ahead on my tasks, instead of immediately going and grabbing a new task, I'll go and spend a couple hours learning something. So that's what I'd recommend. Um, is it too late to move to Florida? Getting expensive? I think it just depends where you live. I can tell you that like my first home that I bought for 260 is going for 450, and that was 3.5 years in over a 3.5 year period. And that like the home that I live in today went up 4% last month. Like it's getting it's definitely pretty wild, man. Like I bought this home in July. So in 2 months it'll be a year in 2 months. What was it? May, June, July. So in 2 months it'll be a year. So it's been 10 months, and I bought my house for 475. It's currently, according to Zillow, worth 620, and like no signs of slowing down. So it is getting expensive depending where you live, but I think other areas are going to be just fine. So I, you know, I happen to love Florida. The cost of living is great in general, and already being a homeowner here, and not paying state tax, I don't know where else I would go. So I will tell you that there are areas that I've looked at for buying a third home that are slightly maybe not as close to like downtown and stuff like that, and those are much more reasonably priced. Am I burnt out? No. Do I do I look burnt out? I know I look fat. Doesn't mean I'm burnt out. That just means I'm uh, your boy's been in a relationship for a year and a half and he's getting comfortable, like this is that happy relationship weight, you know what I mean? Like, you don't need abs, you just need a faithful, hardworking man in your life, Like, we trade listen, that's all you need. You need a faithful, hardworking man who respects and love you, and we can trade I can give you that six-pack abs. Let me just take you on one extra vacation a year instead of six-pack abs, because I don't wanna do that. I don't like that takes way too much energy out of me. Um quick roadmap for beginners. Go pick up JavaScript, HTML, CSS, React, Redux, TypeScript, a little bit of unit testing in Git, and then build some projects, not tutorials. So, what happened to your friend that started YouTube as well? And are you still friends with him today? I think you're talking about Matt. He's doing well, man. He started a shoe company, and shared a story the other day that like it did like $450,000 in business in 1 month. So he's doing very well for himself. So, what do you think about India? I've never been. My brother traveled there, and yeah. I wouldn't even suggest dating while getting deep into your career. That woman will hold you back with wanting time spent with her instead of grinding. I don't think that's necessarily true. I can tell you that I think I'm able to do. One of the reasons I was able to advance my career so quickly was because I had a woman in my life. When I was dating April, she picked up a lot of slack of the things with the house, the animals, with errands. With I was able to work. Listen, man, you're able to work 100 hours a week. At least I was on other things and this and that and grind and save because you have a support structure. With my current girlfriend, it is true I spend time with her, but that's because I'm at a point now where I want more balance in my life. So it kind of depends on where you're at. But I don't think that's necessarily true that having a relationship is going to distract you. I can tell you that for me, I always felt like it helped raise me up in certain ways. I loved working at Amazon. I wanted to go a little faster. Sounds like another housing bubble about to burst. Might be. Ultimately, anytime you're worried about bubbles, just make sure you can survive them. That's my whole thing with like stock, any type of asset. The only real time you actually really lose that money is if you sell it, unless it goes to zero, right? So I don't think housing's going to go to zero. I don't think stocks are going to go to zero. I don't think crypto is going to go to zero. But make sure that you have a rainy day fund enough that you don't have to cash them out at the worst times. 'Cause that's what happens. That's really how people lose. Like anyone trying to build their wealth, that um, is that they sell at an inopportune time because they're panicked or they're forced and they have to be in that scenario where they're like, well, shit, man, I got this thing, my car broke down. Cars are $20,000 for a piece of crap now because of inflation. And, uh, you know, you go in and you say, okay, well, I have no choice. I have to sell these things, even though the stock market's down, instead of maybe having some cash on the side or like, you know, thinking ahead when, saying like, hey, like, um, like I give you a good example. My car was $14,000 brand new, not brand new, as a second owner with like 14,000 miles on it. I said, hey, like, I'm gonna buy this for 14 grand. It's not the nicest car. It's a 2015 Mitsubishi Outlander Sport. And I was like, I'm gonna buy it, and then It's good. It's basically it. These cars basically will easily go to 100,000 miles, and then for the next several years, I am set up on that. So like, if something bad happened with the car today, and I had to get a new car, that same car, because of inflation, I bought for 14 with 14,000 miles on it 2 years ago, which now has 50,000 miles. It's worth $17,000 on CarMax, which is where I bought it. So, yeah. What am I currently learning? I'm trying to learn RxJS more in depth. I've always worked with it, but I want to become an expert in it. Would you ever consider leaving software engineering to real estate full time? You said in the past you have a rental property too, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, I have one rental property that has a tenant in it. And then the current house that I'm in a year and change, assuming I can afford it, I will be turning. This is in like a very touristy spot in Florida. It's about half a mile from the beach. I'll be turning this into a vacation rental. But I have no plans to ever do real estate full time, because you don't need to do real estate full time. And in fact, if in my case, taking a few phone calls here or there, and ever becomes too much, I will hire a property management company and just have them take a portion of it. So the real thing is just to make sure they're cash flowing and that you have reserve funds if something bad happens. And this goes back to the whole thing is like not being forced to make a decision. Generally speaking, if you can, you want to be, if you're buying assets, you want to be set up yourself in such a way that should something happen that you need to protect those assets, you have the capital to do so. So, is it possible to schedule your own on work time at your level? Could you skip Wednesday and work on Sunday? I mean, I'm sure it's possible. It's every workplace is different. What's the best decision of your life? I think the best decision of my life was dropping out of school and just saying I'm going to become a software engineer by any means necessary, and just being able to pretty much have worked every day to make that happen over like a 5-year period. How can I get mentoring from you? Well, let's see. You can go to this link. If you go to mentorcruise.com /mentor/Dylan Israel, you'll find it. I was here like a few years ago when you learned April with some basic. Are you still together? No, April and I split up about 3 years ago. When did COVID start? Like start? Because it was like a couple months before that. I think it's 2.5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. All right, guys. My brother's calling me, so I'm gonna drop. It's been fun though. Later, guys.